Hey, family, it's your sister Jocelyn here, and welcome to another episode of Faith on the Journey. If this is your first time tuning in, we welcome you. We are so glad that you are here and want you to know that we're committed to helping you strengthen your faith, heal your heart, and discover a sense of community. And we do so through a variety of ways by connecting you with a team of Christian counselors and helping churches to start trauma healing ministries across the country. You can learn about these resources and so much more by visiting our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. Now, today, I am so glad that we have the opportunity to interview an incredible guest who has an amazing testimony. Her name is Wendy Wallace, and she is a wife, mom, granny, and Christian living and positivity coach. She also does inspirational digital content as the creator of One Exceptional Life. She is a quadruple amputee. She experienced a flesh eating bacterial infection that resulted in a coma, a 3-month hospital stay, and an amputation of both hands and both feet. So you might consider her having a situation where it would be very difficult for her to say that she's having an exceptional life, but she is. She does what she does every day to give God glory. And she is going to share her story with us today. And I'm so excited to bring her to the show. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. Hi, Jocelyn. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, yes. I cannot wait to hear your story. I saw your video on one of the podcast sites, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's so bold about her story. And so I wanted our listeners to hear what you had to share today. So please share with us.
Well, again, thank you so much. And, you know, it's interesting how life can turn in an instant. And, one day I came down with something I thought was just the flu. I had been running my kids around, they were all teenagers at the time. And I started to feel a little weird, but I had an unusual swelling on my leg. And that was weird. So I went to bed and my husband's like, just, sleep it off. You'll feel better in a couple of days. And so I didn't feel better. And we ended up going to the emergency room when I started losing oxygen. The last thing I remember was them putting the oxygen mask on my face. Over the course of the next couple of days, I had been life flighted to a better hospital that was better able to care for me. They diagnosed me with flesh eating bacteria. It's called necrotizing fasciitis. And that swelling on my leg, that's where it was growing. And while they won't admit, I do believe it came from an ingrown hair, which is really scary. I've heard of all kinds of stories where people have a scratch and they're swimming in the river or something just out of the blue. So I was in a coma for about 3 weeks. And through the course of that time, the doctors kept telling my husband and my kids, you need to prepare for her passing because she's not going to make it. And my husband, he goes, you don't know my God and you don't know what he's capable of. So I don't believe you. You just keep working on her. We're going to pray about it. And I don't know. There were hundreds of people that are praying for me through all our networks and our church family and their networks and on and on and on. And after a couple of weeks, I had multiple surgeries to remove this bacteria because it kept growing. But after a couple weeks, it looked like I was turning the corner and things were going to be okay. But in order for me to survive the mess, they needed to amputate both hands and both feet. And what's interesting is, they had me in a medically induced coma, but they woke me up to tell me that they were going to do this. And I kind of think it's funny because what was I going to do about it? I think they were doing that so just out of courtesy, but I was awake for all of 5 minutes, in my memory, and it was a shock. And they asked me, "So these are your choices. You can go and meet the Lord, or we have to amputate." And I just saw the look on my husband's face, and I was like, "Yeah, do it. Do what you have to do." And of course, my doctors were not believers at the time. They were definitely witness to, and they got to see the power of faith, hope, and prayer through the whole process. So, so they put me back in the coma. They amputated everything, and after a couple months in the hospital, another month in rehab, I came home, and I had always been a work at home mom. I have run businesses out of my home the whole time my kids were growing up. But here I was with no hands and no feet, sitting in a wheelchair wondering what is going to happen with my life. What am I going to do? Why did this happen? And where do I go from here? And so, I was saved in my mid 20s and had been reading and studying and praying ever since then. But here I am, all of a sudden, it forced me to do some deep, deep studying and deep praying to figure out, why did this happen to me? Was there some sin in my life that I didn't know, that I hadn't rectified? And through our studies, the church, we gathered together and studied this out. And ultimately, I learned it's not always because of something that we do that these horrible things happen to us, but God has a plan. We know this, but it could be because he wants me to use this to serve him in some way. And at the time, I didn't know what that was. And so I was at a pity party for quite a while because I was just confused. Where do I go? What do I do?
No, I would imagine you would be in a pity party because that was a whole lot. And wait, how old were you at the time when this happened?
I think it was 46.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were used to life being a certain way for so long, and then out of nowhere this happened.
Well, and the kids were teenagers. I had one getting ready to graduate from high school, and this was like critical mom time.
Right. So I'm curious, you were having your pity party, but also what did you notice in terms of the family dynamics and everyone else around who was also impacted?
They were so patient with me. It's funny, they never saw me as disabled. It was all up here. I was the one who thought I was disabled, but I've always been an optimist. And I always, you know, looked for blessings, and I was having a hard time finding the blessing in this. And so one day, about 7 years in, my daughter, she goes, "Mom, let's go tubing tomorrow. We're going to go tubing down the river." And I looked at her, I'm like, "You've got to be out of your ever loving mind. What sense does it make to put a woman with no hands and feet in a tube and shove her down the river? That's crazy." She's like, "No, it's good." Because remember, she didn't see me the way I did. So after a lot of frustration and fear and all of the all of the things, I agreed to go because she wasn't going to let me drown. I knew that. And so it could be a fun adventure. And it was a day I will never forget because there were so many ups and downs and just tests and turns and everything. And so finally, there we are. We're floating down the river and we're just having a good old time. And, so many people had told me, "You should write a book. You should write a blog." And I'm like, "No, what would I say? I don't know what to do about that. I'm not a writer." And so here we are, we're floating on the river. And all of a sudden, I was like, "You know what? I can do stuff. I can do stuff. And this is really cool." And I bet there are people who are stuck in their pity party too, thinking they can't do the stuff. So let's start the blog and try and encourage people, because that's pretty much my gifting, is encouraging other people through whatever it is that they're going through. Even, there I was in a wheelchair and I was always the guy that would cheer people up. So it turned out the tubing day was one of the best days that I've had since my whole surgeries. And I started the blog and I called it One Exceptional Life because, by golly, we're having one exceptional life. I started to write about amputee stuff. And, this is me trying to cook in the kitchen when I can't even hold a spoon. and it was pretty comical, but ultimately I didn't want to focus on the amputations. I wanted to focus on the overcoming and moving on past the struggles. And that's where I path I took. One Exceptional Life is about overcoming, it's about spiritual growth, it's about gratitude, joy, positivity, peace. Everything comes through the Lord in the gifts that He gives us. And we can't stay stuck. One of the things that I learned when I was sitting there waiting for him to answer my question, what do I do with my life now? He can't course correct you if you're not moving. And so when I started the blog, I felt the Lord's guidance. And so I would write. And, over the course of time, people would comment and they would respond to my emails and they would tell me how much encouragement I was giving them and ask me questions about how to grow their faith and how to reconnect with the Lord because they were stuck somewhere too. And it hit me like right up the back of the head. This is why He allowed this in my life. 2 Corinthians 1:4, and I cannot quote this verbatim, but basically, He comforted me through my struggles so that I can comfort other people in theirs. And I remember waking up in that hospital bed and I saw these bandages where my hands and feet had been. And I prayed Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And I said, Lord, I'm going to trust you with all my heart, and I'm not going to try and figure this out, even though I tried it did. Um, I'm not going to lean on my own understanding, but in all my ways, I'm going to acknowledge you and allow you to direct my paths because I don't know how to do this. It's you and me. We're going to have to do this together.
Wow. Yes. He brought you to this point. He brought you through. And I listened to you. And first of all, praise God for your faith, which was so deeply rooted that even though you were in a valley moment, it still allowed you to make it through that time.
The trauma healing has actually given us an opportunity to truly share some of the pain that we've gone through that has caused us to be in this place.
I think the use of scripture and truth, along with stories that are relatable, begin to start the dialogue for women to be able to recognize and be able to connect the fact that He is in their circumstances with whatever situation.
With this trauma healing groups, we've been able to see people shed their masks and really just open up and share things that they too didn't even realize. And
the transformation from the participants really included just being able to bring their heart to Jesus.
What's amazing is some of them came with particular hurts or wounds that they wanted to share.
It allowed me to be free with some deep-rooted things that I never spoke and know that it was all right for me to speak them.
Being able to recognize their emotions from the very start.
There was no judgment. It more or less said that this is okay, that this is what's needed.
Just the power from being in the room with other women, recognizing that it's okay to share our hurts. It's good to be able to recognize what is a safe place and to be able to take all of those hurts to the cross.
They realized it's something different that they were there to share. And they found healing in ways that they didn't expect.
But once I got to that place of understanding how this kind of really does work, I had a moment of complete release. In that release, I was able to truly open up, even if it wasn't to anyone but to me and God, but to truly open up about some of the things that I had been suppressing or trying to suppress for years.
Every little bit about it is a soft brush stroke that all combines to make just a really beautiful picture. For them to be able to see the different too and have some of the tools that the Trauma Healing Institute implements are very helpful.
I'm always surprised how God is using this. So it's a good place to be.
And I just wanna go back a little bit because in that period, I think you said it was about 7 or 8 years before you went, and had that turning point in your life. there was also a season of grief, I believe, if I were to name what you were going through. And for someone who's listening, who's gone through a physical loss, such as yourself, can you talk a little bit about what you learned about the grief journey? And was there any other words of encouragement you can give someone who's in that valley season?
I was really blessed to have an incredible family. And I think the loss was the biggest part because it impacted the things that I could do. And my kids, I always told them growing up, can't is a four-letter word. We're not using that here in this house. And here I was. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't cook. I can't, and it was devastating. My husband, though, he was like, it'll come. It'll come. Do what you have to do. And however long it takes you to figure this out, we're here for you. And I think the sadness at, I got prosthetic feet pretty early on. And so you get prosthetic legs and you slap them on, and, it's like nothing ever happened down there. But when you lose your hands, it's different because you do everything with your hands. And here I am, a writer, excuse me, which is also ironic. But I use this little stylus strapped to my wrist, and I keep this on all day long, and I use it for my phone and my laptop or reading a book or any of those things. And so I've been able to find tools to help me move through the loss. You know, I think when you're focused on what you lose and not what you can gain from it, that's where we get stuck. And I the sadness was just, it would come and go, but it was always the loss of the hands that was hard. And then I went through empty nest syndrome at the same time. So it was, yeah, it was a very difficult, challenging time. But, God was with me every step of the way, and my family supported me, and they just disciplined me when I had to get out of my, get out of there, come on, let's do something fun. Just to, I think distraction is a good thing. You need something to pull you out, even if it's just for a few minutes or an hour or a day or whatever. Something to keep your mind occupied so that you're not just focused on the loss, but the blessings.
Mhm. Yeah, when you were sharing your process of working through your grief journey, there are definitely moments where you're kinda like, "Oh my gosh, all the things I lost." You can become solely focused on that. But over time, it sounds like you were able to start shifting your focus to what is available for you through the resources and tools, and the fact that you have a loving, supportive family, and that there's still life even after this loss. And you are living that exceptional life now. And so I would love for you to talk about some of the things that you're doing through what I'm calling your ministry. You obviously have a blog, you're all, probably speaking and encouraging others. Tell us a little bit more about some of the life lessons you learned in this new season and what you're doing now.
Well, what I'm doing now is basically guiding women out of the hardship. We go through struggles, our faith begins to waver, and then we get, well, how do we get back to God? How do we reconnect with Him and maintain the joy and the peace and the contentment in our lives? And I love coming alongside them and just giving them the tips and the tools to reconnect with the Lord through intentional time with Him. And so I do that through coaching, and I have a Facebook group that I work with and a membership. And all of these women, they just want a closer walk with the Lord. And oftentimes we think we lose our joy and our peace when we have major events happen in our lives. But we don't, because if we've been saved by the grace of God, he gives us the joy and peace. We just have to, they're fruits of the Spirit. They're evidence of our relationship with Jesus. And so the closer we are to Jesus, and I always say this, Jesus is our vine. The closer we are to our vine growing on that, the easier it is to walk in the fruits. It's truly been a blessing to be able to just share the love of the Lord in really everything, whether it's in person, a lot of it is online. Um, and as much as the internet isn't always a great thing, for somebody like me who I can drive, I can get out and do stuff, but I have to be careful what I do where I go. And so using the internet as a platform has been a real blessing. So I continue to pray that it stays available to us. You know what I mean? Because, the way the world is going right now and the struggles that Christians are having, and sometimes we say words of faith or mention God or Jesus, and Facebook gives us a big old content blockage thing. And who knows, but I'm going to do what I do as long as I am able,
Yeah. Yeah.
because God does receive the glory, and there's so many people who just don't get it, and they need to hear about it.
They do. They do. Wendy, I would love for you to think back over your life and think about life before the surgery and after. How has your perspective on life changed?
Before, it was busy. It was getting through the day. It was working hard. It was raising the kids. It was trying to do the best I could with what I had, but it was busy. And we raised our children to be believers in Jesus. And, thankfully, they're all adults now and they all have a relationship with him. So I'm thankful for that. But I think we just hadn't slowed down to really enjoy the process. And so now I spend a lot more time with the Lord. And I have the opportunity to work with my daughter every day. And the boys, they're all married and raising families, and they are just growing in the Lord. And things just seem like they have more perspective now. Your family, your work is all important, but the Lord is a bigger part of that because he's the one where all these things come from.
That's right. That's good. And Wendy, if someone was listening right now who, again, went through a recent loss similar to this, what words of encouragement would you offer them?
Look to Jesus. Just keep your eyes on him. And one of the things I like to teach, and you've probably heard this before, is if you're feeling disconnected from the Lord, pull a chair in the room and call it Jesus's chair and talk to him. I mean, we know he's with us everywhere, right? But if you got a chair in the room, you're more apt to just talk to him. You can't look at that chair and think, well, that's just a chair, because you brought it there to be for the Lord. And so talking to him, and I'll tell you, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, if you memorize it, lean on it, let it guide you in your life, you're going to find the peace you need.
Amen. Wendy, thank you so much. Where can my audience just check out more information about you and the great work that you're doing?
My website is oneexceptionallife.com. And I have a Facebook group. It is for women. It's called Women Living Exceptionally with Joy and Jesus. But you'll find it if you go to the website. And I'm on Facebook too. So I think you have the link for that too if you want to put that in the show notes. But Yeah, look me up. I'd love to talk to your audience.
Yeah, yeah, check her out. I so appreciate you, Wendy, being on the show today. Thank you for blessing us with your testimony.
Well, it was an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I thank you all for tuning into today's episode of Faith on the Journey. Wow, what an incredible story that she shared. And if you were encouraged by it, you know what to do. Please leave a 5-star review and share this message with a friend. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. That'll help us to get this message out to more people. So that's it for this week. I hope you all check us out on our website at faithonthejourney.org for more resources on counseling and other free tools. And until next time, you stay encouraged, family, and you keep your faith